the companion of Egypt, when he comes, all of the deserts of Egypt flourish and they become green again. Cities are built in Egypt at the hands of the Egyptian that defy logic and cause people to marvel at it. Structures that will dwarf the ancient pyramids of Egypt will come into existence, and the Egyptian pride will fill the hearts of all of the Egyptians. They'll be proud once again that they are Muslims. They will be proud once again that they are Egyptians, that they were born on that land that Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam says is one of the four most sacred spots on the face of the earth, is the land of Egypt. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد إليهم المهديين وسلم تسليما السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My dear brother and companion Mahmoud.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you for joining me on this episode today.
Thank you for having me here today.
You're an Egyptian citizen. You were born and grew up in Egypt. I also am an Egyptian. My biological father is Egyptian. My mother is American. And my biological father, his mother is from Alexandria, and his father is from Upper Egypt. And like most Egyptians, they have, well, many of them have roots also in Africa. I have in my blood, blood from Ethiopia. I have from Senegal. I have from Sudan, other places. Egypt has a long history of love for the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam. And it's known about the Egyptians that they adore and they love the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, and they love the Prophet Muhammad's family. And there are a lot of Sufis in Egypt. Most Egyptians are Sunnis that incline towards Sufism. And in Egypt, there's a lot of different mausoleums that they have built in order to honor the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam, or the people of the house. You have over there, you have Sayyida Zainab, which is a mosque slash mausoleum slash area actually that celebrates Lady Zainab alayhi salam. You have the most famous of them all, which is the mausoleum of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in the mosque or the masjid of Imam al-Hussein in a very tourist area in Egypt where many people go to. It's one of the most popular masjids in all of Egypt, and it was alleged to have within it the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in the Dari'ah, or in the mausoleum itself, although that is not correct, as his head was buried in Karbala. But nonetheless, it is one of the three mausoleums in the area that claim to house the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. You have also over there mausoleums that they have built to honor some of the companions that were martyred on the soils of Egypt. You have over there the mausoleum of Malik al-Ashtar, who was a close companion and supporter of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib had basically appointed Malik al-Ashtar to be the servant of the people of Egypt, the person responsible, the governor of Egypt, and he was assassinated in Egypt alongside with his son when the enemies of the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam, led by the forces of Muawiyah, the son of Abu Sufyan, he had commanded basically that Amr ibn al-As place poison in some honey and give it to them, and that's what happened, and they ended up dying. You also have over there the mausoleum of Muhammad, the son of Abu Bakr, who was also one of the shining examples of a true Shia, one of the companions of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and he was also murdered, and his body was basically placed within the carcass of a dead donkey. He was wrapped in the skin of a dead donkey, and he was, eventually buried in Egypt, and a mausoleum was built over there in order to honor them. And so they have this history of loving the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And part of that is due to the fact that over the course of the Islamic history in Egypt, there was an empire that was established for a small time period, and that was basically the Fatimid Empire. And it was during that time period that Shia, although not 12 Shias, they were basically Ismaili Shias, had ruled over Egypt and kind of ingrained within them the love of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And you have a lot of relics and a lot of architecture that still survives to this very day from that particular time period. And Egypt has been mentioned in the Quran. It's actually one of the few countries that were mentioned in the Holy Quran by name. You have Egypt being mentioned in there. You have Rome being mentioned in the Quran. And you have a lot of stories within the Quran and also within the Hebrew Bible that basically highlight the role that Egypt has played within the past of the Abrahamic religions. You have Abraham alayhi salam going to Egypt, him with Sarah at one point in time. They travel through there. You have also, obviously, the famous story of Joseph and the Bani Israel, and how Joseph was imprisoned in Egypt after he was adopted by an Egyptian who was, one of the wealthier ones, him and his wife, Zuleika. And you have the story about how Joseph was imprisoned in Egypt, and eventually he was led, he was taken out of prison, and he was granted great authority and power over Egypt, and he became kind of like the right-hand man to the Pharaoh that he had now converted to the religion of Joseph and Abraham, and that is the monotheistic religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Pharaoh that Joseph had appeared with or ruled side by side with, that was granted authority over the land of Egypt by, was the Pharaoh Akhenaten or Akhenaton. You also have obviously the famous story about how eventually the descendants of the 12 tribes, after once having been welcomed in Egypt, they were enslaved and oppressed in the land. And eventually Moses, one of the Ulil Azm prophets, he is born and raised in Egypt, and eventually and educated in Egypt, and eventually he leads the Israelites out of the land of Egypt in a miraculous way. And everybody knows the story of Moses when he stood against the Pharaoh. And so Egypt has had a history of being home to many great prophets and messengers, but it also has a history of having been home to a lot of horrible tyrants. And this is something that Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he was writing to Malik al-Ashtar, he had informed him of that these people, they've been oppressed over the centuries, many, many times over. And he basically told Malik al-Ashtar to make sure that he is extremely just when being placed over them, and to take good care of them because they are a great people that love the people of the house. And there were other prophets that, according to the narrations, of the Ahlul Bayt and the various hadiths and stories, and also Judaic writings and stories have been, present in Egypt at some time. There are narrations that state that the prophet Jeremiah, for example, that he eventually got martyred in the land of Egypt, and that's where he was buried, that he was stoned to death over there. And so that's an Israelite prophet that ended up in Egypt. There are other stories and tales of prophets and messengers that walked across the land of Egypt. Egypt is a kingdom that some narrations state its very first ruler was one of the very first prophets and messengers that were sent to mankind, and that was the prophet Idris, whom is also known as Thoth, or he's also known as Osiris. And you can see the likeness in the name between Idris and Osiris. And so it's thought that Idris is an Arabic version or a corruption of the original name of Osiris, who is a famous god in ancient Egyptian mythology. And we have spoken before in some of the episodes that exist here on the School of Divine Mysteries about how the gods of the different cultures, whether it's the ancient Egyptian civilization or ancient Greece or ancient Rome or ancient Arabia, that many of these gods that they took to worship in the origin of the matter, these gods were actually messengers or prophets from the 124,000 prophets that were sent to mankind, and they became idolized much later after these people had passed away. And this is not just an assumption, but rather it's something which is explicitly stated in some of the narrations of Islam. Some of the narrations of Islam talk about the various idols that are mentioned as having been worshipped in the time of Noah and that are referenced specifically in the Quran. And basically these idols that were referenced in the Quran as having been worshipped in the time of Noah, the narration goes on to state that after Noah, that these men, they were mainly companions of Noah, and they were righteous men that after Noah, they went forth and they were kind of like governors or leaders in the various regions of the earth. And they did much justice and much goodness. And the people wanted to remember them after their death. And so after their death, because obviously there didn't exist any cameras or things like this of the sort, and so they wanted to commemorate their memory. And so they built these statues of these righteous men. And then after a few generations had passed, Iblis came to these people and he seduced them and he convinced them and he corrupted the religion as he corrupts all religions, and convinced them basically that these were not messengers. He made them forget that and forget that they were righteous people, but convinced them that these were various gods. And so the various tribes that existed on earth at that time period, they built homes for these idols and they continued to worship it. And that became kind of like the repeating sunnah that occurred throughout the earth in the various regions, with the various civilizations, that there will be these nations that were sent prophets and messengers, because the narrations state that 124,000 different prophets and messengers were sent to these people, the people of the earth. But over time, Iblis made them forget these individuals and worship them. And that's the case with Osiris. The name Egypt in Arabic is Misr. And in the Hebrew Bible, there is a character who is one of the descendants of Noah, who comes after the flood. So Osiris or Idris, Enoch, came before the flood, and he's the one who kind of first establishes Egypt. After the flood, there's a second reestablishment of Egypt. And the Hebrew Bible says that the descendant of Noah that is, goes and he establishes Egypt, his name is Misraim. or Mizraim in the English version, but in the Arabic version it's Misraim, and that is a longer version, obviously, of the Arabic word Misr. And so that's where Egypt today retains its title from, having been named after this descendant of Noah, who was a king and a hajjah over the people of Egypt of that time. And Egypt, also with Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, the narrations state that Egypt will play a very important role. And this is quite clear when you examine and you look into the narrations of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. But it's also quite clear when you look as well into the Hebrew Bible. There are many verses that speak about Egypt and its role in the end times. And so Imam Ali alayhi salam and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi and the Ahl Bayt alayhi salam, they spoke about how there will be a gathering of companions that would take place in Egypt. And that the lead figure of those companions would be somebody who would be known as the companion of Egypt. Okay, and some people have interpreted this to mean that that individual is a forerunner and a companion of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, but they have also understood it to be that he is the companion of Egypt as in its rightful just governor who will govern the lands of Egypt, the rightful king and heir to Egypt who will govern the land of Egypt under the umbrella of the divine just state that is established by Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam in the end times. There are also narrations from the Ahl Bayt alayhi salam that explicitly state that Israel, the state of Israel would be established in the end times. It will be a state that will be oppressing the Arabs and the Muslims. It will be an occupying force that is established and enforced by the Dajjal or by Rome in that time, and that they will be occupying also the Masjid al-Aqsa, and that the only person who's going to be able to free al-Masjid al-Aqsa, or the Promised Land, Jerusalem, from the hands of the occupiers would be this character of the companion of Egypt. This is something which is mentioned very clearly. In some narrations it says it's the Mahdi who will free it. In other narrations it says it's the companion of Egypt that will end up leading finally the Egyptians to go forth and to free the lands of Palestine. And so this character has been one that the Egyptians have spoken about for a very long time, and they're constantly on different shows and programs and in many books that have been written, and you know that's constantly being sold in Egypt on the streets of Mahdi and Masr Gidida and all these different places. You'll have, these people that have these books that go over these topics of Egypt in the end times that are being sold, and most Egyptians are very, they're very familiar with this idea. And they're patiently waiting for this companion to come. And it's kind of ingrained in the mythology since the time of ancient Egypt till today. This idea that Egypt's, the keys to the kingdom of Egypt is always changing hands between the forces of good and the forces of evil. The forces of good and the forces of evil. And you have that shown in the mythology of, in the story of Osiris and Set of ancient Egypt. A very famous story where basically you have Osiris, and Osiris is the first king of Egypt, and this is his inheritance. He owns Egypt. Egypt belongs to him. He was meant to rule Egypt, and he was appointed to rule Egypt by the gods or by God. So he's a divinely appointed leader that is to rule, but he has his brother Set, and his brother Set is evil. His brother Set has a lot of envy against him. His brother Set is set to steal. He has his eyes set on Egypt and is determined to steal the inheritance away from Osiris by any means necessary. Osiris is the more peaceful one of the two, the more wise of the two, the just of the two. And Set embodies envy and hatred and chaos and darkness, and he's willing to do anything. And they associated the story of Set and Osiris with the sunrise and the sunset every day. There is this eternal battle that's taking place over Egypt on the ground as it is in the sky up above. Every day Osiris will rule justice, the light will rule over Egypt, and every night Set will conquer him and he will rule, or he will take power away from the good. He will occupy Egypt, and during the rule of Set, it will always be injustice that is spread. And so they kind of see the coming of the companion of Egypt as being a retelling of this story of ancient Egypt, of Osiris and Set, where after they have been ruled for so long by the darkness, that finally the sun will rise once again, and either Osiris or the son of Osiris, Horus, will rise once again over the lands of Egypt and free it. And that falcon that great warrior will lead the Egyptian people into freedom and prosperity and peace. In modern Egyptian history, it's been a total dictatorship. And I had returned to Egypt after having been abroad for a while. I had returned to Egypt in my youth, and that was in 2008. I went to school in Egypt for many, many years. And then I went to the United States, and I was there for a while. And then I came back to Egypt in 2008 after I had graduated from university. And it was in 2008 that I moved into Cairo, and specifically into the most populated city in all of Egypt, and that's the city of Mbaba. And it's also known as being one of the most poor cities. I lived over there on At-Tayyar Fikri Street, Shara At-Tayyar Fikri, and for me, it was a beautiful city. And that is where my family is from. And that's where they currently reside. My immediate family, they live over there in that region. And the city of Mbaba was a city where even though the people were extremely poor, you found happiness in the hearts of the Egyptians, Mahmoud. They were extremely happy, and they have rida. They are satisfied with what God has ordained for them. They're known as one of the most patient people on the planet, and they're one of the most kind people, and people that are willing to open up their homes for anyone.
Yes.
They suffered for a very long time, and when I had come in 2008, they were still being ruled by the only ruler that I had pretty much known to exist in Egypt for the majority of my life, and that was the modern-day Pharaoh, Hosni Mubarak, Muhammad Hosni Mubarak, Lanatullah alayh. And that tyrant, he was responsible for basically oppressing the Egyptian people, and him and the the class, the upper 1% of Egypt specifically, 10 to 1% of Egypt that were part of his ruling class, the elite. They were the ones whom were swallowing up 90% of all of the wealth of the country while keeping the 90% of the Egyptian population in a state of wealth. They were like hamsters running in wheels in order to find their daily bread. And finally, after so much oppression of rights and lack of freedoms, the Egyptian people, they rose, and I partook in the 2011 Egyptian revolution. I was actually at the forefront of the crowd, the very large crowd of people that were emerging out of Mbaba and crossing over towards Tahrir Square in order to protest and topple the tyrant. We saw it as our divine mission. God had placed it in my heart, and he placed it in the heart of the Egyptian people to rise up and tell Pharaoh that he had been an oppressor. And indeed, we went so, and I camped out alongside with my brave brothers and sisters in Tahrir Square, and we fought many battles against the Egyptian police. Our lives were threatened. There were literally bullets that had flown by my head. There were physical altercations that had taken place. The army, the Egyptian army, at one point they had contemplated bombing the entire area. At night, the Egyptian forces would go forward, and they would attempt to kidnap and imprison and assassinate the protesters, brutally murder them. I was there and present and witnessed people from the protesters, normal people, being kidnapped by Egyptian forces and taken into the Egyptian museum over there in Tahrir. And you could hear the screams of the Egyptians as they were being beaten to death within the Egyptian museum. And we eventually succeeded in toppling the Egyptian dictator and that Egyptian pharaoh, and it became the famous scenes that the whole world celebrated, in which Egypt finally, was able to overcome and throw out the tyrant that had ruled it for such a long time. And off of the back of the victory of the Egyptian youth, which I was one of them, the Muslim Brotherhood, a corrupt and perverse Islamic extremist organization that is currently outlawed, they jumped up to power. They stole the victory away from the Egyptian youth. As you know, and they rose to power, and they placed one of its members as the president of Egypt, and that was a tyrant by the name of Mohammed Morsi, Lanatullah alayh. Morsi, one of the first things that he did is he began to persecute the minorities that were in Egypt, and to build allies with the Al-Qaeda and ISIS groups that were existing in the region. He was responsible for the killing of a famous 12er Shia cleric that existed in Egypt at that time. He basically caused the people to go drag him out of his home and to murder him. He also was responsible for instigating the Egyptian media, and we saw people like Yu'ayid al-Brashi, Lanatullah alayh, come on TV and basically begin to speak out against Shia Muslims and warn the Egyptian population that there was a Shia invasion of the country. And most of the poor Egyptian people, they did not know the difference between what a Shia is and what a Shi'i is. Shi'i is a communist. A Shi'i is a follower of the Ahl Bayt. and they couldn't differentiate between the two. They couldn't even tell you, most of the population, what is this versus what is that. But they were just being indoctrinated and brainwashed on television to hate anything that sounded like Shia. And so, lo and behold, Yu'ayid al-Brashi goes on television and he begins to air a piece about us, where me and our companions were gathered in, and we found that we were raided all of a sudden during Asr prayer. As I was in the third rak'ah, we found ourselves being raided by the Egyptian police. There were knocks at the door. I continued the prayer till its completion, and I rose and I stood up, and one of our companions went forward and he opened the door, and lo and behold, the Egyptian forces of Mohammed Morsi, they came raiding through the house. It was in the middle of Muharram, and they arrested many of my companions that were there, and we were just gathered peacefully in order to learn about the hadiths of the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam, and to engage in worship and to hold prayers with one another. They searched the place for weapons. They didn't find anything. They didn't find anything that was illegal at all. They arrested several of the members, and they chained them up and took them to the police station, where they remained for a couple nights. And then on the 10th of Muharram, the day of Ashura, they ended up walking them in a line of prisoners, one after the other, like the image that's on the screen right now. Each one chained to his brother that is standing either before him or behind him, and they deported them outside of Egypt. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ended up punishing the Morsi administration for its great acts of hatred and oppression against the followers of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. And in a miraculous way, it was only a short time afterwards that we found that the Sisi and the army in which he was leading at the time under Mohammed Morsi, that they basically arranged a coup d'etat, and they dethroned Mohammed Morsi, and they took from him the power. And Sisi became president after that, and Mohammed Morsi was thrown in jail, where he eventually died in the prison. Shortly after Sisi took the power, he also, his administration, his mukhabarat, his intelligence services, they began to oppress members of the faith. We found that police vehicles began to ask questions. Police officers began to stake out the area where we were living at. We found ourselves to be under constant surveillance, and so we fled Cairo, and we went all the way out towards the desert, and we stayed in one of the cities that existed between Cairo and between the Sinai Desert, and we remained there for a while until they eventually Ahmed al-Hassan salam, he told us that we were no longer safe in Egypt and we had to escape, and we did. And we were forced to leave out of Egypt. And ever since then, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed his wrath over Egypt, and a punishment came down upon Egypt, and their economy has gone to waste, and they went from being a nation that at one point in time, it was 3 pounds, 3 Egyptian pounds would equal $1, and then it became a thing where 7 Egyptian pounds equaled $1. And since we left, it went from that to being a thing where today it's like 50 pounds per $1. And so their currency became useless and poverty has engulfed the entire nation. And yet, Sisi and the ruling class, just like in the days of Mubarak, they continue to thrive and hoard on to the wealth of that great country. And now we find ourselves in a situation, and it's a very strange situation. It's a very unfortunate situation where we have been spreading the call of this dawah. We've been spreading this dawah over the airwaves, and we found many Egyptians that have come forth and they've embraced this call, and they have accepted the companion of Egypt and accepted the message of glad tidings of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. They began to grow in numbers that are unimaginable, and they went out on the streets in order to place posters and hang banners from the top of bridges. And this was something which they themselves desired to do. And so they came to you as somebody who represents me over Egypt, and you organized, you helped them organize themselves, and you put them in touch with one another. Why don't you tell us about what happened with these pure brothers of ours in Egypt, and what are they facing right now?
These brothers, they believed that you are the companion of Egypt mentioned in the narrations, and they wanted to go and make like all the other countries that believe in you. Like many other countries in Europe and in Asia, around the world, they go and put posters that has your image and says who you are. So they felt that they have a special connection with you, that because you're the companion of Egypt to every other country, you're the Qa'im, you're the Mahdi, but to the Egyptian, they felt that they have a special relation with you, so they wanted to make it the companion of Egypt face and name everywhere in the streets. I told them it's gonna be dangerous because of how the government is and how the police force might take that. And they said they didn't care. They know that at the end they would be taken or prisoned, but they said nothing will stop us from our belief. Their job is to catch us, but our job is to make everybody in Egypt know who's the true king and know who is the companion of Egypt, Abdullah Hashim Abu Sadiq minhu salam. And they went forth, they did it. They were men that said a word and they fulfilled it with their complete choice. Nobody forced them to do anything. They were actually warned, but they went and they did it anyway. And when somebody was being caught by the government, this didn't stop them. It increased them more. They went again and they hang banners again on bridges and they spread more posters. And it's increasing. The more the attack of the government against them, the more they get provoked, and the more I find new people are calling. They say, we want to join this. We want to make posters, want to do all this stuff. I told them everything is on the internet and all the information is there. Everybody is free. And it's increasing now. It reached from South Egypt, Said, and Luxor, and in Manufia, and in El Sharqiyya, Asher from Ramadan, and in Gizan, Kirdasa, and Nahia, and many other places. It's increasing everywhere. There's even in Sina now, people want to do that, and people in other countries, and in Alexandria even, they want. So it's spread by itself. People saw the channel, people know who you are, and nobody can stop the people from what they believe to be true.
And so how many of them are arrested right now?
What's been witnessed that they were arrested were 8, but there were more than, much more than that, who were spreading the posters. But these 8 were witnessed.
Arrested.
Yeah.
And I was told that there were witnesses who heard the screams of the individuals, or some of the individuals, as they were being beaten by the Egyptian forces. And till this very moment, all of them, with the exception of one, has gone totally missing.
Yeah.
And we have Amnesty International moving on it, and we also have the United Nations whom are moving on it as we speak right now. And we have other human rights organizations in Egypt that are moving to locate the individuals. But I praise these individuals and I bless these individuals, and I'm proud of these individuals whom are their example and their likeness is like the likeness in the Sunnah of all of those whom left their societies in order to give victory to the truth, just like the companions of the cave did in their time, and the companions that were with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did in their time, and the companions and disciples and apostles of Jesus did in their time. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make their sacrifice and their efforts a way and a cause, and He will, for the establishment of a just state in Egypt, inshallah, and for the fall of the tyrant. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take revenge on their behalf against all those whom oppressed.
For sure.
Egypt has a lot of secrets that are involved in it, and all these secrets will come to life with its companion. And the forces that are in Egypt, the forces of Set, the forces of darkness and chaos, they fear so much just the mentioning of the companion of Egypt, because they know that this, from the narrations, means the end of their rule. Even though nothing was written in the posters that they hung that incited any sort of violence or hatred, was there? It was just simply posters that had on their hadiths from the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam. Isn't that right?
Just narrations of what Prophet Muhammad said about the companion of Egypt and what Imam Ali said. And that's, there is no inciting.
There's no inciting, there's no nothing, but it terrifies them.
Yes.
It terrifies them. And it's interesting to know also that in the history of Egypt, all of those messengers who came from Egypt and were 100% pure Egyptian, they were always murdered and rejected by the people of Egypt. And we have in that an example in one Egyptian prophet, and his name was Amid. And he was a prophet from the 124,000 prophets and messengers that was sent to Egypt. He was an Egyptian. He tried to guide his nation to the truth, and he was murdered and assassinated and imprisoned in the Giza area, right over there by the pyramids. And after his death, his companions, they built a giant monument in order to commemorate him. And the monument bears the face of Amid, and that is the monument of the Sphinx, the Great Sphinx of Giza, that is there today. The face which you see on the Sphinx is actually the face of that prophet Amid, who was rejected by the people. There exists also in the area several graves within the pyramids that contain bodies of prophets and messengers that were sent to Egypt. The pyramids were constructed by Enoch or Idris, Osiris. No wonder it's a wonder of the world, because it was established by a man who was sent and enforced by God and his angels. And so the site of the Giza Plateau, where you have the pyramids and you have the Sphinx, these are actually not just historical monuments, but they are religious monuments. And the connection between the ancient Egyptian relics, artifacts, and history, and between the Judeo-Christian Islamic narratives, it is the companion of Egypt that will tie these things together. Egypt has also had a history of rulers that were successful, and they were righteous rulers that were sent to Egypt. But like the Bible says, a prophet is never without honor or dignity except within his hometown. And for that reason, you always find that the Egyptian prophets and messengers or rulers that were righteous that came from it, they were unfortunately rejected by the rest of the Egyptians because they saw that he is nothing but one of us, and so they murdered him and oppressed him, while the majority of the righteous rulers that were successful were either half Egyptian or they were foreign rulers that the Egyptians until this very day love and honor and dignify very much so. And we mentioned the example of Malik al-Ashtar, for example, who was, who basically had been murdered, assassinated in Egypt, and they honor him now with a mausoleum. And he was basically one of the righteous kings that were appointed over Egypt, one of the righteous rulers. You have Osiris as well. His origin was not from Egypt, but he ended up migrating to Egypt. And you have also the example of Misraim, and he was also a son of Noah. Noah was not Egyptian. And so he came from Noah and he ended up settling there. And he was successful. You also have one of the other 124,000 prophets and messengers that was a very successful and righteous king over Egypt. And a lot of people don't know that for sure that he was one of the 124,000 prophets and messengers, but a lot of people have suspected him to be a divine king, and that is Alexander the Great. And he was indeed somebody who was appointed by God and was one of the unknown prophets and messengers. And even though he's not the figure of Zulkarnain in the Quran, but even the Sunnis and the Shia, many of them, the Muslims, have contemplated this idea, and it is the overwhelming popular opinion that the character of Zulkarnain probably is Alexander the Great. And so they admit and confess that Alexander was a person who was divinely appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Alexander was responsible for doing great wonders in Egypt and establishing great cities such as the city of Alexandria that is named after him. And he is revered. And the companion of Egypt that's to come and who has come and who is the companion of this call and whom Ahmed al-Hassan alayhi salam declared myself to be, the Qa'im of the family of Muhammad. The Qa'im of the family of Muhammad is the companion of Egypt, and that's why you have in certain narrations him being presented as the Mahdi, and other narrations him being presented as the companion of Egypt. He is also the coming of Osiris, the reincarnation of Idris, the coming of Alexander to the people of Egypt, the coming and the return of Malik al-Ashtar in the Raja, which is the return of all of the righteous to the people of Egypt in the end time. And so that's why he's named the companion, because he was a companion of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. He is a companion of Imam al-Mahdi and is a companion of the Amani of Imam al-Mahdi, Ahmed al-Hassan. And he is the owner and the divinely appointed king. He is the Osiris of the time, who is sent to establish justice and equity and peace and prosperity for all of the Egyptians. He is sent there to spread true monotheism and to re-establish a state whereby Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one whom appoints the ruler or the king. When God said, Inni ja'alun fil ard khalifa, the companion of Egypt is the one who reinstates that, and that is the original religion and system of governance of ancient Egypt. It was the gods or God who appointed Osiris at first. It was God who appointed or it would have to be Osiris who appointed, or Ra who would appoint the pharaoh in every day and age. Yes, there were false pharaohs who rose to power and impersonated and usurped the kingship and the rulership, just like we had false popes who usurped the power from the true popes, and we had false caliphs in Islam that usurped the power from the true caliphs that were appointed. The same thing happened in ancient Egypt, but the structure itself, that it's only God who appoints the ruler. This is re-established in Egypt in this day and age, in which the Egyptian people embrace the will of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he acts as the spokesperson on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that left in his final will the name of Abdullah. He appoints Abdullah, the Mahdi, the Qa'im, the companion of Egypt, Osiris, Alexander, Malik al-Ashdar, who comes back in this day and age in order to take control of a country that has been oppressed and return it back to its ancient might and glory. It is actually what a lot of people are perhaps unaware of, but what's alluded to and very clear in the narrations is that the companion of Egypt makes Egypt become a superpower once again. It becomes a superpower that is super rich, and it actually goes back to sustaining all of its neighbors. The companion of Egypt is capable of knowing where are the hidden treasures of ancient Egypt. Egypt is a land of great mystery. There are many things that the narrations have stated and many things that they haven't, that the companion of Egypt reveals about Egypt. One of those things is the tree of life, the original tree of life with the fountain of life that is the source of all life on earth. That fountain, that tree exists in a hidden place in Egypt, which is uncovered by its companion. There is so much gold that is to be extracted from Egypt that it would be able to sustain the Egyptian people and make each and every one of them live richer than Pharaoh. In addition to the rest of the Arab nations, every single one of them, for centuries to come. If one person spent all of his life trying to extract all of the secrets in Egypt, they won't be able to. The companion of Egypt manages to open up the secret chambers, the secret doors that allow people into the secret chambers of the pyramids and the Sphinx, whereby in one of those chambers there is this room. It's the room of eternal life or youth, and it is a room that if an individual is old and they step into it, they become young again. If an individual is an amputee and their leg is amputated, their arm is amputated, and they go in there and they put their limb in that region, in that room, it will grow back again. It is a region that, a chamber that if you place in there a chicken, it goes back to its original form of being an egg. And so he heals and he sustains and he brings back youth and prosperity to all of the Egyptian people. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that for every nation there is a calf, and the calf of my nation is money. And so the companion of Egypt, he destroys that modern day calf and he eliminates the concept of people being sustained by paper and by coins or by monetary means, and he rules over all of the Egyptian people as he should, as their Father. He grants every single one of them a home. He makes no differences between them. He grants them their daily bread for free and their daily foods. There's not a shop or store in sight that would accept money in exchange for a merchandise or a property, and people are allowed to take whatever it is that they need in order to sustain their day. And the fear of not having for tomorrow becomes absent from the Egyptian people. And this model which he establishes in Egypt becomes a model that the rest of the world hungers for. And so other nations make revolutions in order that they join in the new Egyptian empire that becomes a symbol of justice for all of the worlds. He brings forward the treasures and the secrets. And he brings forward scriptures and original versions of the Torah and Gospels that were written uncorrupted. He brings them forward. He brings forward things and narrations and verses from the Quran that have been long lost. And he establishes a kingdom like the world has never seen, and one that they will never forget until the very end of time.
SubhanAllah, I can't wait for this day. I can't wait for this day to go back to Egypt with you. The king returns to his throne.
Well, the king of a nation is its servant. A king of a nation is its servant, a king of a nation. And the master of a nation is its servant. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not send Muhammad and the family of Muhammad except that they serve, that's their purpose, was to serve the sons of Adam, the appointees of the devil, of the shaitan, these pharaohs. They believe that their purpose is to basically usurp the resources of the land. The companion of Egypt, when he comes, all of the deserts of Egypt flourish and they become green again. And its population increases 1,000-fold and becomes one of the most populous nations on the face of the planet. Cities are built in Egypt at the hands of the Egyptian that defy logic and cause people to marvel at it. Structures that will dwarf the ancient pyramids of Egypt will come into existence, and the Egyptian pride will fill the hearts of all of the Egyptians. They'll be proud once again that they are Muslims. They will be proud once again that they are Egyptians, that they were born on that land that Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam says is one of the 4 most sacred spots on the face of the earth, is the land of Egypt. There will be rivers like the Nile that will flow throughout the land. The land of Egypt will become a cradle of civilization. It will become a home to all refugees and all of the poor from around the globe and around the world. The land of Egypt will become a beacon of true freedom for the world and a source of education and care and kindness and love.
I pledge allegiance to you as the king of Egypt and the Qaim of Al Muhammad, and all the Egyptians will do so very soon, inshallah.
And I say to the Egyptians, Mahmoud, I say to them nothing more than what my grandfather said, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, when he came to rule over the Muslims after they pledged allegiance to them. He said to them, I came into you wearing this shirt of mine, and if I leave you wearing any other shirt other than this shirt of mine, then call me a traitor or accuse me of treachery. And that is the same path that I would walk in. I would come as a servant. I would seek to take care of and enrich them. And then I will leave this earth with the same shirt that I'm wearing today, happy that I would have fulfilled my duty and my oath to Allah and His Messenger. And all of I want to remind also the Egyptian people that every individual that has been appointed over them that was righteous was appointed by God or His Messenger, whether it was Osiris, whether it was Alexander, whether it was Malik al-Ashtar, anybody else was not appointed by God, but appointed by the people. And they've had a very important experiment that they just underwent recently, where they had a revolution and they tried through democratic means to elect a ruler, and that ruler ended up being a tyrant, Morsi, that they didn't like. The choice of the people failed, and they ended up trying to elect somebody else, and they quote-unquote elected Sisi, and they now are suffering the results of their choice. And I think that the Egyptian people now, they need to submit or try the choice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Try and trust in the choice of God. Be like the angels who submitted to and prostrated to Adam, and see how it works out for you. See if you don't benefit. See if Egypt does not become a living paradise on earth. See if Egypt and the Egyptian people are not enriched for eternity and honored for all time. See and witness Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure and His rida with the Egyptian people, and the only way to obtain God's happiness, because right now His disappointment and His wrath is upon all those who have rejected His choice. And the only way to attain God's pleasure once again is to accept the messenger that was sent to them. And I, Abdullah Hashim, am sent with the will of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he dictated on his deathbed my name, Abdullah, when he mentioned that there will be after him 12 Imams, and after them there will be 12 Mahdis. And he said, as far as the 12 Mahdis go, their names are Abdullah, Ahmad, and Al-Mahdi. And we know that before the Sufyani and before the Mahdi, there appears an Egyptian and a Yemeni, and I am that Egyptian that is sent forward, and my name is Abdullah Hashim in the will of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Yemeni is Ahmad al-Hassan. Thank you, Mahmoud, for joining me today, and God bless you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Welcome.